start a new series. We're going to be in the book of Ecclesiastes. So if you have your Bible or a phone or some device, still don't have those Google glasses where like the scripture comes across the screen. I mean, that would be cool, but still don't have that. Haven't seen anybody that has that either, so don't know. And I guess the biggest problem with that is if like you're walking down the street or you're driving and you've got the thing is scrolling. I don't know, how that's going to end up. It's hard to police that, Were you watching your Google Glasses while you were driving? No, officer, I wasn't. I mean, it's kind of like, how do you prove that? I don't know. Have to work that out. But if you would, turn to Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is a book that, as I was kind of searching around and thinking about in my own life, haven't heard a lot of preaching on it. I think one reason why is when the first section of the book starts out with the title, Everything is Futile, it's just hard to work with that. It's just hard to go somewhere with that. And in preaching, we want to be inspirational and uplifting, and we want you to walk away, feeling encouraged. And when you preach a sermon and it starts out with everything is futile, it's really hard to walk away with that. If you guys, is there a slide or a picture? Okay, you're working on that. Awesome. I'll go with that. Hopefully you can stare at something that will maybe help you not be too bored. And so I have entitled this first message, The Essence of Life. Not because Everything is Futile isn't the greatest title ever, but I tried to kind of look at this first couple chapters and really assess what Solomon is saying through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. And I think that what he is talking about is the essence of life. What it is to live, what it is to be, and for us, what it is to be human, what it is to be a man or a woman or a child. And I spent a lot of time praying and thinking about these words because I've really, for my whole life that I've read any of King Solomon's writings, I've struggled to understand his attitude, his premise, where he's coming from. Now, if you're not familiar with who King Solomon is, he was a famous king many thousands of years ago who reigned over Israel. He was the son of David, a very powerful, very rich, very wise king. And in fact, so wealthy that I believe that if you took all the wealth of the top 5 richest, wealthiest people in the world and added them together, it would still not equal comparatively for the time the riches of Solomon. So here's a guy who really had what we might call means. All right, he had the means to do about anything he wanted to do. If there was technology to do it, he could make it happen. And so he writes this book towards the end of his life, and I think he gives us somewhat of an unusual perspective on some of his conclusions of what it means to live. And I have found it to be very profound. And we've come through a very practical series, this last series on managing our money, stewardship, being responsible and wise with the things that God's given us. And so it's very practical. So not that this message series isn't practical, but I think it probably is a little one more of those type scriptures where we have to really think about it and really not just kind of like, okay, Jonathan said this, I'm going to write it down, boom, it's done, I'm going to go back to playing Clash of Clans and wait for the next thing, like the next nugget. That's how, I'll be honest with you, that's kind of how, well, I didn't play Clash of Clans, but that's how it was when I was younger. And, I was listening to a sermon, and I was like, okay, there's going to be 3 points, and there's going to be like 5 profound things that are going to get said. And so I'm just looking for those things, and I'm going to write them down and stick them in my Bible so I can do my Christian thing and move on. All right, I wasn't really wanting to grab it. So if that's anyone else out there, I encourage you to really embrace some of these statements because some of them are really quite challenging to accept and to assess. And so I invite you to do that if you would. Let's begin in verse 1, chapter 1. The words of the teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem, absolute futility, says the teacher. Absolute futility. Everything is futile. What does a man gain for all his efforts that he labors under the sun? Okay, so and that's a question. All right, what does he gain? All right, so in other words, We work hard all of our lives, or we don't. Maybe we work kind of hard, not very hard at all. But we're doing something with our time, even if we're just sitting there, not doing anything, staring at the wall. And so what do we get ultimately? Okay, and it's not a question like, well, you get a paycheck, well, you get, whatever your portion of coins might be, or, depending on the time, what you're trading for, what you're working for. That's not really what he's asking. What he's asking is, what does it really mean? What does it really do? What do we really truly accomplish with our work? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Okay? So you have really the first of one of these really profound statements. Generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. In other words, the earth is still spinning, things keep on going, and they will until Jesus returns. And so people are born and they die. All right, they come, our generation is here, we will all die, another generation will rise up. That's how it's been for thousands of years, since Adam and Eve came up on the scene. And so it's one of these kind of cosmotic, overarching, how far is the universe, how old is God kind of statements. Okay, that's kind of where you've got to kind of be mentally, I think, if you're going to assess this. The sun rises and the sun sets. Panting, it returns to its place where it rises. Gusting to the south, turning to the north, turning goes the wind. And the wind returns in its cycles. All the streams flow to the sea, and yet the sea is never full. The streams are flowing to the place, and they flow there again. All right? And so when I'm thinking of this in particular, I'm thinking of that illustration in earth science where, the water, it goes down to the ocean, and then it evaporates, and then it comes back down, and it rains, and then it rolls down okay, you're with me. So, and this is the problem with this type of literature, this wisdom literature, is we kind of have to relax our mind a little bit when we're thinking, because that's what happens to me. If you're like me, the first time I actually went up, I don't do this very often. You would think having a farm, having a lot of land, you would go out and peacefully in the middle of nowhere read the Bible. I actually don't do that a lot because I don't have really enough time to walk out there and do that. But I actually did on Tuesday morning. I went out and I went up by the pond. It's a beautiful day, and I just sat and I just said, God, I just want to listen. I just want to learn. And I just sat there and thought about that, and I realized I had to just quiet my mind. I had to quiet my thoughts because I, like you, oftentimes when I come to God, it's, God, I need this. God, I have this problem. God, I need you to fix this. I need you to help this family or help this person, or we have this need in the church. And like last week was a big week. We found out that the church that shares our building is going to be discontinuing, and so that leaves a great big question mark. What is our future for LJC? And so it was kind of a big week, and as I was kind of recalling some of our history as a church plant last week, then I got kind of emotional after that, and I was thinking about it, and thinking about the exciting journey that we've been on and wondering what the future is. And so my mind was just racing. And I realized that it is really hard to just be still. Just be still with the Lord. Just to let, I can close my mouth. I have developed self-control usually. My wife might say that not as much maybe as you think that I do. But closing my mind, just turning it off, that is very difficult for me. But I think as we think about these things, as we approach these chapters in Ecclesiastes, that's what we have to do. We just have to cease thinking about the kids, thinking about the bills, thinking about our job, all the things we've got to do after church. We just have to quiet it and just think about it. So we've talked about the wind, we've talked about the streams and the water, this circle, that it just circles, and it keeps circling. He says, all things are wearisome, and man is unable to speak. The eye is not satisfied by seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. All right, in other words, we never quite get everything we want, right? We never quite see enough, or hear enough, or have enough. We're always striving for more. We're always working for that next promotion or for that bigger house or that new income level where we can buy a boat or go on vacation or do whatever it is that we want to do. You know, we all have those list of things that you want to do that you don't feel like or you can't afford to do. And so we're always going to that next thing. And so he says all things are wearisome. In other words, they're just constantly moving, constantly doing things, but yet never really going anywhere. It's just in a big circle. What has been is what will be. That actually reminds me of a line from The Proposal, which I'm not sure I should be referencing that movie or not, but it's a really funny movie. There's probably a couple scenes that we could have done without. But there's that crazy lady, and she's out in the woods, and she's doing some kind of funky Indian thing. She's like beating on the drum, and she's saying all kinds of weird things and a couple of probably inappropriate things that I won't repeat here. But she makes this statement, is whatever is what shall be. So you kind of think about that. It's like, yeah, whatever is what shall be. You know, it's kind of dumb, but it's almost so dumb that it's actually profound. And this statement reminds me of that. But it's very true. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Now, how many of you guys have heard that statement before? Even if you haven't read Ecclesiastes, how many of you have heard that? There's nothing new under the sun, okay? All right, we hear that a lot. It's cliche, even in our culture. It comes from the Bible. It comes from this wisdom literature. And it basically means that history just continually repeats itself. That we continue to do as a race, as people, the same things that we have always done. We give in to temptation, to sin. We murder one another. We lie, steal, cheat, blow stuff up. You know, the list goes on. That we just keep repeating these same things over and over and over. So he's kind of building this case here. And he's not just making these blank statements and expecting us to in blind faith to accept them. He's kind of putting out these proofs. Saying, look at the streams, look at the wind, look at people, you know, everything that happens under the sun. Now, I think it's interesting, everything under the sun, in other words, not in heaven, okay, not where God is, not in the cosmos necessarily, but on earth, okay, for the plight of humanity. And that is most certainly our context. He's dealing very specifically with us as people. And then he says, can one say about anything, look, this is new. It has already existed in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of those who came before. And of those who will come after, there will be no remembrance by those who follow them. I, the teacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to seek and explore through wisdom all that is done under heaven. God has given people this miserable task to keep them occupied. And I have seen all the things that are done under the sun and have found everything to be futile, a pursuit of the wind. Okay, you can see right away why this just isn't a big sermon topic, or you don't see it, you know, when on the cute little church signs that they make the little phrases. You know, I don't think I've ever driven by and seen one that says, everything is futile. You know, I just haven't seen that one. If you have, let me know, because I think that's worth probably taking a picture and putting it on Facebook. Maybe I should have done that. Maybe I should have gone out and drew on our sign out there, everything is futile. We'll see how many people came to church today. It's not really encouraging, at least on the surface. What is crooked, we're in verse 15, what is crooked cannot be straightened, what is lacking cannot be counted. And I said to myself, look, I have amassed wisdom far beyond all those who were over Jerusalem before me. And my mind has thoroughly grasped wisdom and knowledge. I applied my mind to know wisdom and knowledge, madness and folly, and I learned that this too is a pursuit of the wind. For with much wisdom is much sorrow, and as knowledge increases, grief increases. All right, so we have this very intense, very serious look at the struggles of humankind. And I think as we began to look at that and we began to assess and to think critically, and I think probably one of the reasons why we struggle so much with the understanding of these things is because when we come to church, we kind of have this mindset of, well, I'm going to put on my best, I'm going to look my best, act my best, I'm going to try to fake everyone out and make them think my life is great, I have no problems, and praise Jesus, the end, and we're just going to smile and do our church thing and then leave. All right? And that's one of the reasons why Life's Journey exists, is because we didn't want to play the game anymore. All right? Church isn't bad. God isn't bad. Jesus is awesome. In fact, if you poll people, you poll them just generally, believers, non-believers, about Jesus, and then you poll them about church, you get really high numbers for Jesus and not so high numbers for church. Okay? And I think one of the reasons is because of this whole game that goes on. This kind of fake game. And you know what? We all try to play it at times. Every one of us. I do. I fall in that temptation. I think, man, I don't want to be discouraging to anybody, so I'm just not going to unload all my problems on them. And I'm not saying, because, we could easily walk in and be like, okay, so what he's saying is next week I need to come up with a list of all the things that are going bad in my life, and I'm going to walk around at church, be like, hey, how are you? I'm terrible. I want to tell you about how miserable my week was. It was just awful. I almost killed myself twice, and somebody stole my favorite golf trophy, and they ran over my dog, and it's just horrible. And just walk around telling people like, oh, hey, did you hear about? Okay, so that's not what I'm saying. All right, I'm not saying if you're spiritually mature, you're going to be negative and mean and hateful and talk about all the bad things that happened to you. I'm just saying, you don't have to act like you have it all together. All right, because truthfully, no one in this room, except maybe Patty, definitely not Randy. Just kidding, Randy. Maybe one or two others have it together, but everybody else, we don't have it together, all right? And so I think we need to be honest about that and recognize that life is struggle. Life is difficult. It is hard. I was watching a TV series the other day, and one of the things that happened in the TV show is that there was like this big cold, and they were like taking away people's pain, and everybody liked it because, of course, nobody likes to experience pain. Now, me, I cannot just sit in and watch and enjoy something. I wish I could. I've tried for 37 years to be able to do that, but I can't. I have to analyze it and think about it and decide whether it's realistic or not and how that would work out in reality. And from a sociological and philosophical, it's a terrible problem. I need to get counseling for it. Maybe, Jeff, we need to get together later on and you can help me with that. But I have this terrible problem with not being able to just sit and watch and enjoy it. So as I was thinking about that, there is a huge problem with that because our pain is what defines us. We learn from pain. Even when we're a child and we're 2 or 3 and we reach up and we touch the stove, we grab the curling iron, we burn our hand, we didn't learn when our mom said, you shouldn't grab the curling iron, you shouldn't touch the stove. We learned when we grabbed it and we felt the pain of that. And we learned, ouch, don't touch that. That is bad. All right, and that's what shapes us, that we realize that sin is destructive, sin causes pain, and so we learn to avoid that pain, and we learn to live a life away from pain by experiencing it. And that's almost a misnomer of the human condition, but yet that is the truth of things. And if you think about it, and I know this is really asking a lot because we're getting to the point where you're getting ready to pull out your phone and start playing games, but I want you to really think about and understand and grasp God's purpose for creating us. Remember, his purpose for creating us was that we might have the opportunity to choose love, which of course brings the opportunity to choose hate, to choose darkness and pain. And the only way to do that, because God could have created a race of people that didn't sin, didn't make bad decisions, didn't even have that possibility, but the only reason why we have free will is so that we could choose to do either one, a real honest choice. Okay, it's not like at the lunch line when you're at school and you have like pizza and a hamburger. Okay, it's like, well, it's not really a choice because there's like 5,000 other things I would rather have, but you have a choice. Okay, it's not that kind of choice. We had the choice to do anything. I mean, the bottom line of the human condition is we can choose to do anything. We might be preconditioned, we might be whatever, we can make a whole bunch of excuses for why we do or don't do what we do, but ultimately we have the choice. And in the beginning when God created us, he gave us that possibility of pain, and it's that pain and the knowledge of darkness, the knowledge of hate, the knowledge of evil that causes us to choose love, that helps us to understand the difference of that choice. And it goes so far beyond that. That when we live our daily lives, when we experience our work, when we experience the challenges and the difficulties in life, that choice remains. It doesn't go away at the point of salvation. We make ultimately the choice of where we will spend eternity, but our life goes on. And we can choose to reject God. We can choose to walk the path that He's laid out for us. But ultimately, it is up to us. And God can do things to try to help us, to try to encourage us. But ultimately, it's our choice. I don't like it. I think probably if I took a poll in here and if we could remove that choice, we would probably all, or most of us would just be like, yes, let's just remove that. I don't want to sin anymore. I don't want to create problems for myself or anyone else. Let's just opt out. But we don't get an opt out. And that's what Solomon is saying. It's futile. It's a circle. It just goes round and round. That cycle of free will and of sin and goodness and darkness, it continues to go around and around. And we are caught up in the middle of it. And we have to choose to live in spite of it, to find joy in spite of it. Let's go on. Chapter 2. I said to myself, go ahead. I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy what is good. But it turned out to be futile. I said about laughter, it is madness. And about pleasure, what does this accomplish? I explored with my mind how to let my body enjoy life, with wine and how to grasp folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom until I could see what is good for people to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. Okay, so a lot of perspective. In other words, our life is short. Another cliche, all right? Obviously, a lot of these cliches coming from Solomon. All right, so he set out on a... the idea of science hadn't really been established at this point, but he set out kind of on this experiment. And he was just going to do every fun and awesome thing, whether really sinful or not, and see what it got. Okay? And he's kind of the guy to do it, right? Because he's super wealthy, has thousands of slaves at least, and so he can, if anybody can do it, he can. All right? He is totally set up to do it. So he's going to go out and do all this stuff. So, and he says, here's what he did in verse 4. I increased my achievements. I built houses and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks. I planted every kind of fruit tree. I constructed reservoirs of water for myself from which to irrigate the trees. And I acquired male and female servants. And I had slaves who were born in my house. And I also owned herds of cattle and flocks, and more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. I amassed silver and gold, treasure of kings and provinces. I gathered male and female singers for myself, and many concubines, the delights of men. So I became great and surpassed. The list goes on, all right? He did just everything, good or bad. Having cattle, planting fruit trees, great. Having concubines, not so much. And so he tries all these things. And he says, so I became great and I surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. It occurs to me, you may not know what a concubine is. A concubine is kind of like a woman who's not your wife, but you're going to indulge in some things that you should only be indulging with your wife, with them, depending on the day of the week or month. Okay, just make sure we're kind of all, I'm not sure everybody got that, and since our younger ones are not in here, I could probably draw a little bit of explanation there. He says, all that my eyes desired, I did not want to deny them. I did not refuse myself any pleasure. Okay? Which is really a bad idea. But he's being brutally honest. Okay? He's not playing church. He's not playing the game. He's just being honest. He said, I did everything that I possibly could. And I took pleasure in all my struggles. And this was my reward for my struggles. And when I considered all that I had accomplished and what I had labored to achieve, I found everything to be futile and a pursuit of the wind. There was nothing to be gained under the sun. All right? This is spoken by the richest, most powerful man of his time. Now, there is a great truth here. I want us to pause for just a moment. We have a few minutes left. We may not make it through the rest of the chapter, and that's okay. But I want you to realize this can be a balloon killer that some of us probably need, a balloon popper. I don't know that you kill balloons, but you do pop balloons. Okay, that's probably a little less violent too, popping instead of killing the balloon. Although I've seen children try to kill balloons, my own children and others when we have them around. Solomon is ultimately saying, I had everything I could possibly ever want, and you know what? It didn't make me happy. It didn't bring the joy that I thought it was going to bring. All that money, all those pleasures, whether good or bad, they didn't do anything. At the end, I was empty. I was vain. I had nothing. I felt like I was back at the very beginning again. And yet he had labored and he toiled and he'd struggled and strained to acquire all of those things. I mean, we have 30 cows, we have 15 cows and 15 calves, 30 head of cattle, and I feel like on top of everything else, that's about all I can keep track of. I can't imagine having, thousands of herds all over the place. And yet he did all these things. He had all those resources, all those people who would just, die at his command. And he's saying, I'm still not happy. It's still not enough. I'm still lacking. I'm still wanting something. I'm still empty. Verse 12, then I turned to consider wisdom, madness, and folly. Okay, madness is like craziness. Folly is like foolishness. If you're not familiar with those words. For what will the man be like who comes after the king? He will do what has already been done. And I realize that there is an advantage to wisdom over folly or over foolishness, like the advantage of light over darkness. Okay, so now finally, he finally, after a chapter and a half, he actually makes a slightly positive comment, okay? And it's like, wow, okay. He actually said something slightly positive. He says there is an advantage of wisdom over foolishness. And you remember, wisdom is distinct from knowledge. Knowledge is the accumulation of understanding of things, but wisdom is that applied knowledge that you achieve after experiencing something. All right? The old cliche, wisdom comes with age. That's because you take your experiences and you take the knowledge and you mix them together in a bowl, and instead of getting oatmeal, you get wisdom. All right, everybody tracking with me on that? He says, the wise man has eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I also knew that one fate comes to them both. And so I said to myself, what happens to the fool will also happen to me. When then have I been overly wise? And I said to myself that this is also futile. For just like the fool, there is no lasting remembrance of the wise man, since in the days to come both will be forgotten. How is it that the wise man dies just like the fool? Therefore I hated life, because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me. For everything is futile and a pursuit of the wind. I hated all my work that I had labored at under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who comes after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool? Yet he will take over all my work that I labored at skillfully under the sun. This too is futile. All right, so he's established that after pursuing every pleasure, he found no joy, and realizing that all the things that he's accumulated, all right, all of his riches that he has amassed, when he dies, all of those things will belong to someone else. And so all the time that he spent striving and straining to get these things, and all the knowledge and wisdom that he's accumulated in his life, it's going to go to nothing. So I began to give myself over to despair concerning all my work that I had labored at under the sun. When there is a man whose work was done with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and he must give his portion to a man who has not worked for it, this too is futile and a great wrong. For what does a man get with all his work and all his efforts that he labors at under the sun? Question mark. So we're back to our original question. For all his days are filled with grief, and his occupation is sorrowful. Even at night his mind does not rest. That would be me for sure. This too is futile. Now, I have to be honest with you. I saw, when I was looking for a great little slide to put up, I actually Googled, everything is futile. And I didn't come up with much, but I did come up with, and I didn't post it because I didn't want to offend my Star Wars friends. I'm more of the Star Trek variety. But there was this picture of this giant Borg cube, and he was chasing this Imperial Star Destroyer. All right, like firing their Borg graviton beam or whatever it is at it, and is about to just totally annihilate the Star Destroyer. And at the bottom of them, there's a caption that says, "Resistance is futile." And I almost used that as my sermon slide, but then I was like, well, first of all, my wife's going to shoot that down, number one. But then number two, that's probably a little bit too far. But I will at least verbally tell you about it. Even if we strike it from the YouTube recording that we post on Facebook, at least for you who are here, I will deny it later, but it was a great picture. And if you happen to Google that, not right now, but later, then you can see that picture. It comes up pretty close to the top of all the pictures. So, a pretty tragic place that we're at, all right? But in this last few verses, we'll try to get this in. I know time is running out. And these last few verses is the truth and I think the ultimate conclusion of where Solomon came, and this is where we need to arrive at, all right? Because honestly, many of us, we will live in the midst of that cycle. We will be in despair, all right? That's the word, at least in the Holman Christian Standard, that we used to read today. We will get stuck in that place of despair and we will never recover. And we will live life in despair thinking it's all in vain, or thinking that we're eventually going to arrive. It's like the pot of the gold at the end of the rainbow, but then if you try to drive it down, you can't ever get there, kind of a deal. Not that I ever did that. Actually, I think I might have done that once when I turned 16. I was looking for excuses to drive. I'm like, dude, there's a rainbow. I'm going to see if there's a pot of gold. No pot of gold. In fact, I couldn't even find the rainbow after a while. So I'm not sure if that was a problem with the rainbow or me. But it's like we never quite arrive. Nobody ever feels like, oh, I'm there. I can remember thinking, man, before we bought the farm out in Sparta, if I could just buy a farm and be a farmer, my life would be perfect. I would never want for anything else. And then the farmer across the street came up for sale, and Stephanie's like, well, it would be really nice if we had that farm too, and then we could live in that house and build another house. It made me think of the Old Testament verse about, tearing down your barns just to build bigger ones, kind of a thing. And so even I struggle with those same things, of always wanting more, never being satisfied with what we have. But a great truth is found in the midst of this pain, just like the toddler who touches the hot iron. Solomon says, there is nothing better for man, and he's talking about humankind, so it's not excluding women, it's not sexist, it's not anti-feminist, whatever. It's just talking about people, all right, just to clarify. Than to eat, drink, and enjoy his work. Wow. I'm going to read that again. He goes through this whole thing. He says, this too is futile. There is nothing better for people than to eat, drink, and enjoy their work. So what is he saying? He's saying it doesn't matter what kind of work we do. It doesn't matter whether it's being a missionary in wherever, or whether it is delivering the mail, or working at Walmart, or being a busboy, which was my first job. It's kind of a nasty job. It's pretty hard to love and enjoy that job, honestly. But we should just enjoy it. Enjoy what we have. Enjoy life. That if we spend our whole life striving and struggling and saving everything up for later and never enjoying and living in the right now, we are caught up in that futility. That our whole life will be futile. And guys, I get it. I struggle with that same thing. It's like the treadmill that's running and I keep trying to jump on. It's which is also futile. I just can't seem to always enjoy the moment. Because some of those moments are hard. Dealing with people that die, dealing with parenting and struggling to put food on the table and struggling to have hobbies and do things that we want to do, and it seems like it's so hard sometimes. But God says that we are to just enjoy those times. Just enjoy whatever it is, how great or small. we feel our lot in life is, how poor or wealthy we feel like we are, how educated or uneducated, how fortunate or unfortunate we feel like we are, God says there's nothing better than to eat, drink, and enjoy our work. And that kind of implies you need to do some work. That's probably an important thing to draw out there too, Not talking about working at your job, not talking about raising your kids necessarily, but to get up, to serve God, to do whatever it is we have to do, doing the dishes, changing diapers, running the plant, whatever it is, whatever our work is, we've got to do those things. That's our work. Stephanie and I were having this conversation actually this morning for the better part of our marriage. We've been married 19 years this year. And, for 14, I think over 15 of those years, she stayed home. She didn't work outside the home. And, of course, you get some flack for that. Those of you stay-at-home moms know that. People are like, the working women can kind of put you down sometimes. And then it goes the other way. If you're a stay-at-home mom, you can be like, oh, I can't believe you work. You hate your children, kind of a thing. So it's a two-way street, okay? Both of those are, it's just sometimes you got to work and sometimes you can stay home with your kids, and it's not as simple as what it sounds sometimes. But that work was just as valuable as the kind of work that I did outside of the home, if not even more valuable. So that we can get caught up in what the work is, and that's probably the biggest part of the problem. But what God is saying to us through Solomon is that whatever our work is, whatever our struggle is, whether it's significant, whether we're the president of some huge company, or whether we are just raising our 2-year-old at home, that we're to do that work with joy. And here's the thing. God doesn't give us things that we can't do. Right? And this is where we struggle a little bit, because we're thinking, oh, God, I just, if you don't know my boss, there's no way that I can enjoy my work. All right? You don't know my children, there's no way that I can enjoy my children right now. But we can. It's a choice. It's our choice. Because that free will goes both ways. We can choose to do good. We can choose to do evil. We can choose to live a miserable, futile, worthless, just running around like the hamster who's in the little wheel and he just keeps running and going nowhere. We can live that kind of life, or we can live a meaningful life that is full of joy. I want to read this last section, and I'll close with this. He said, I have seen that even this is from God's hand. Because who can eat and who can enjoy life apart from Him, apart from God? For to the man who is pleasing in his sight, He gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner He gives the task of gathering and accumulating in order to give to the one who is pleasing in God's sight. This too is futile in the pursuit of the wind. Let's pray. God, even though it's hard to embrace pain, it's hard to embrace the place that we are in our lives when we're not content, we're dissatisfied with where we are, we're dissatisfied with how much money we make or what we have. God, you have challenged us, you have set before us this truth of embracing it, of accepting it, and of finding joy in it. And God, I pray today for each one that is here, wherever they are, that you would give us a spirit of joy, that you would give us acceptance for the things that aren't perfect, for the things that seem unwanted in our life. And God, I pray that whatever the work is, whatever difficult things that are ahead this week, whether it's facing a difficult marriage, facing a difficult job, whatever it is, Lord, I pray that you would give us strength, that you would give us courage, you would give us a new, fresh set of eyes, a new, fresh set of ears to see and hear the good things that are before us. God, I pray for those that are just in the pit of despair and discouragement today, and they just feel like maybe this truth sounds good, but it just isn't going to work for them. God, I pray that you would just give them peace, that you would just love them into your wisdom of understanding how life really is. God, I pray that you would open our eyes, awaken us to the truth of our life, to the truth of the significance of our work. Thank you so much for Aaron's message that she gave to us, that we are to be doers, not just hearers only. So I pray, Lord, that this week that we would go out and we would do your work. We wouldn't be focused on ourselves and what we have or don't have, that we would go and serve. We would be a light in the dark places that we go. Or in this culture, in this nation, there are many. Lord, would you deliver our church? Would you deliver us? Would you deliver our nation? Would you bring a spirit of repentance and of truth that we might be set free from sin? I just thank you and ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we'll talk some more about it next week.